Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry, the webinar started a few minutes late. We had some technical difficulties we just wanted to work our way through. Anyway, thank you again for joining us today. Well, with one thing and another, we're now having to meet virtually like this, and I welcome you to our webinar. We had actually planned to do this event live a few months ago, but events came about. But hopefully sometime in the future, we can go back to having some in-person events. Before we begin, some housekeeping. Everyone is in listen-only mode at the moment, so don't try to speak to us because we can't hear you. But that does mean that you are free to yell at anyone, other occupants in your house if you have to do so, and we won't hear that either. We do welcome questions, and there'll be a time at the end to answer those. And there are two ways to ask questions. The first way is there's a question mark at the top of your screen. If you click that, you can enter a question, enter it at any time, and we will collate the questions and ask them to the speakers at the end. You can also send us questions through Twitter if you prefer to do that, and we are at Probe Energy Exchange, and we can answer your questions there. If you have any other technical difficulties, please use the attendee chat, and some of the Pollution Probe team will be able to help you out from that. And for those of you who don't know about us, Pollution Probe was founded 50 years ago. It is Canada's oldest homegrown environmental charity, and we've become an established and credible convener for objective and balanced discussions related to energy and environmental issues. We work a lot on building partnerships with governments, industry, academia, and civil society to deliver real, lasting solutions to our current environmental challenges. Pollution Probe's energy work is dedicated to helping Canada transition to a sustainable low-carbon energy system in an efficient and equitable manner. Our energy work is divided into two. We have our energy exchange program, which it works on increasing public engagement through energy ambassadors program, and we also work on energy literacy. And you can check out our new interactive website on Canada's low carbon future. Our energy policy work is targeted at policy areas we see as requiring intervention. In the past year, we've worked on the future of natural gas as innovation, as well as this project, and all our work can be found on our website. And on to the webinar. My name is Richard Carlson. I'm the Director of Energy Policy and Energy Exchange at Pollution Probe. Canada is both urbanizing and densifying. While the current pandemic may change that in the short term, it is likely that this densification trend will continue. Meeting rising energy demands in a dense urban area requires new skills and new approaches. Also, the pandemic has proved that the future is truly unknowable, and everyone can benefit from more flexible and resilient systems, including energy. A more distributed and flexible energy system can provide economic opportunities to communities across Canada. Integrating these resources provides the opportunity to lower bills through reducing the need for large infrastructure, as well as lowering GHG emissions and improving communities' resilience. This webinar will look at how we can do that. So today we have a great group of speakers, all of whom have extensive experience in the future of energy in urban areas to help us consider what we can do. To start with, I wanted to, moving forward. Oops. Sorry. To start with, I want to talk to you about our recent projects. Replacing Pickering, the next step in the GTA's clean energy transition. This project examined how the Greater Toronto Area, what the GTA is for short, could help meet its energy needs following the impending retirement of the Pickering nuclear station, and can also provide a roadmap for other large urban areas looking to meet their increasing energy need through local non-emitting sources. As we are being a charity, rely on funding. This project was funded by TAF, the Atmospheric Fund. We appreciate their support for our work. It was a decade ago now that the Ontario government announced it was going to close a 3,000 megawatt Pickering nuclear generating station in the mid-2020s. Pickering has been operating for nearly half a century, and unlike the other nuclear plants in Ontario, it was deemed too expensive to refurbish for various reasons, age and design being the largest reasons. The plan is to retire all the reactors by 2024. That may be extended. The government has said it will do so, but no formal decision has been made. The Pickering nuclear station is located only 40 kilometers from Toronto, and as such, much of its output is used in the GTA and has been used in recent years to provide peaking power. Regardless of your opinion on nuclear energy, nuclear is a non-emitting energy source. Yet despite action on reducing overall emissions from Ontario's electricity generation, successive governments have not made any plans to replace Pickering with other non-emitting sources. And the current projections just show increased gas-fired generation once Pickering is able to, once it retires. I should note that This project does not get into the nuclear debate. We're not commenting on whether nuclear is good or bad or should be increased or what. What we are focused on is the fact that Pickering is being retired and now we'll remove non-emitting electricity generation. To avoid increasing emissions, non-emitting solutions to replacing the energy services Pickering currently provides will be needed by 2025. That does not give us a lot of time, and what we can do by 2025 is the focus of our project. To provide the context, Pickering currently produces around 20 terawatt hours a year, but only around 10 to 15 terawatt hours of additional gas-fired generation will be required. The rest would be met through reduced exports and other measures. An additional 10 terawatt hours of gas generation would equal about 4.5 megatons of GHG emissions increase annually, which would be equivalent to the total emissions from all electricity generation in 2018, and would increase Ontario's emissions by about 2 to 3% alone. Ontario's electricity grid has made great progress in the last decade to reduce emissions, as we can see from the figure at the bottom of the page there. It would be a shame to lose that. The GTA uses about half of all the electricity generated in the province, although it has a slightly higher share of peak demand. As such, the GTA share emission from the Pickering shutdown would be around 2.25 megatons annually, which would mean a 6% increase in GTA emissions. Buildings are the largest source of emissions in the GTA, and a higher carbon-intensive electricity system would exacerbate that problem. At the same time, increased electrification of heating and transportation, as well as population growth in the GTA, could increase electrical demand, which may lead to greater use of gas-fired generation if non-emitting solutions are not possible. While the GTA cannot and should not go alone, the people in the region will need to take more responsibility for their energy and in deploying non-emitting solutions. Such solutions could also provide additional benefits to the region, such as lower costs, resiliency, and economic development. And this needs to be done by 2025 if we're going to be dealing with Pickering. Also, the GTA is not unique in many of these problems. Growing electrification is likely to be a common experience for large cities across Canada. As such, trying to consider how the GTA can meet energy demand after Pickering is a good case study for examining what other large urban areas can do as well. We don't come up with all the answers ourselves. We did hold a stakeholder workshop in January. Oh, there, okay, it's coming back now. And where we heard from about 30 experts from various organizations give their opinion, and our work is built off what we heard from them. There really are three solutions. On the demand side, in other words, how we use energy, it was generally agreed that in a dense urban area, demand side solutions are the most practical given the lack of available space. And demand side solutions could include conservation energy efficiency, which we are doing at the moment as well, and that should be continued. Demand response, which would help reduce peak demand, which would reduce the need for additional infrastructure, and gas-fired generation during those hot summer days when everyone tries to turn on their air conditioning. And strategic demand reduction, which is a new system that uses energy efficiency and demand response to provide system resources. And this is done at specific times in specific places, such as when the grid is particularly carbon intense, or at a particular junction where there is local congestion that needs to be reduced to avoid infrastructure build. SDR can reduce system costs by reducing demand at specific times, which can optimize the system. Supply side, dense urban areas have limited non-emitting supply options, but there still is potential for the GTA. Distributed energy resources such as solar and others are available, and district energy. And Julia St. Michael from Enwave will talk more about that later on in this webinar. Storage is another solution. That storage can be from chemical batteries, compressed air, mechanical, or other forms. And storage acts really on both the demand side and the supply side. Also, the storage doesn't have to be stationary, as Matthew will talk about. Electric vehicles have large potential to supply energy storage services to the grid or to buildings. So why aren't we doing it? What we heard was that technology is not the barrier. The barriers are institutional and include market signals. We need real market signals to allow a lot of these technologies to be able to play a role. Planning is still centrally driven, and DERs and solutions that do not require building new wires or central generation, called non-wire solutions, are generally not included in planning or only cursorily included. Policy uncertainty continues to be a problem. Providing what is the real cost in terms of what are the peak pricing, and also being able to allow for different types of rates, such as allowing EV owners to, for example, to charge at night at lower costs rather than exacerbate peak conditions. And information is a perennial problem in Canadian energy planning. Lack of information leads to siloed responses when what we really need are coupled solutions that include electricity, heating, and transportation. And we also need information on where DERs could provide system benefits. A lot of that information is just not available. So what can we do? Our report breaks down short, medium, and long-term actions, and you can read about that. In the short term, we focus on 4 things. First, continue Ontario's conservation energy efficiency programs. They can reduce the need for gas generation and also reduce bills for consumers. They can also, energy efficiency also has great employment projections for after, when we're looking at the post-pandemic world as well. The second would be to develop locational time-specific strategic demand reduction programs. Like these can be targeted at the grid where there's congestion, or times in the grid is particularly carbon intense. It differs from conservation energy efficiency by targeting locations and times rather than just being general for everybody. So that does not, so one cannot necessarily replace the other, but they are complementary. Develop a value-based DER programs using sophisticated time and location-based rates that can compensate projects that help meet system demand and reduce emissions. And planning is crucial. Utilities should be required to transparently consider DER and other non-wire solutions, such as strategic demand reduction, in infrastructure planning, and in other system planning. Replacing Pickering with non-emitting solutions over the next 5 years is an ambitious goal. But what we heard is that the technology is not a barrier, the technology exists. It will not be easy. To replace Pickering, the real need is in the full integration of the demand and supply sides. New techniques of integrating strategic demand reduction with non-emitting DERs and managing the resources so they provide value to the system can not only reduce costs and improve services, it can help reduce emissions. And as we mentioned, the closure of Pickering can be an opportunity to rethink how we plan and develop electricity in Ontario, and as a case study in how other urban areas can meet rising energy need, and our recommendations can benefit other jurisdictions. For more information, you can find our report on our website. We also have a technical appendix which goes into how we created the numbers and how things progressed. Thank you. The next, we're going to be moving on to the presentation from Matthew Sachs from Peak Power. Just load the slides here. And thank you very much. So Matthew Sachs is the Chief Operating Officer of Peak Power, and I'll allow him to introduce Peak Power and what Peak Power is all about. Matthew?
Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Matthew Sachs here. Just to give a little bit of a background on Peak Power before we start talking about some of the transitions that we're seeing in the energy industry. We're a Toronto-based software company at the intersection of energy, commercial real estate, software, and mobility, though I don't get into it too much here. Really, we're trying to tackle some of the toughest problems in the energy markets using advanced analytics on big data related to buildings in the energy sector. We're based out of Toronto with offices in New York and Boston. We've received some funding from both the federal and provincial government for our clean tech innovations, but we're backed by the family office of David Thompson, the chairman of Thomson Reuters. And we've had some good success so far. We've grown to about 35 people and been featured in both Forbes and BNN with partnerships with OPG, Mitsubishi, and Kruger Energy. So we see ourselves at the intersection of the grid edge and electricity markets. So what does that mean? To us, the grid edge is where end users consume energy. So that would be in buildings, in solar, in batteries, and electric vehicles. And electricity markets are the wholesale markets where electricity is bought and sold that have daily price fluctuations based off of supply and demand. And we believe that by forecasting electricity markets, we can send optimization signals for the operation of distributed energy resources. This is all part of kind of a macro trend, as you guys are likely aware of, the move away from centralized power with large generators outside of the city, sending energy in one-way directions over transmission lines into the city, into a distribution network, into a distributed model of energy. And the key feature of the distributed model is two-way flows of energy where everyone has the ability to produce, store, buy, and sell electricity. And it's our premise that advanced software with artificial intelligence will be required to manage all of these different transactions in a dynamic energy grid. So I like to use a metaphor to explain the problem. Problem facing utilities is that every piece of grid infrastructure, every pole, every wire, every generator, it's all designed for moments of peak demand. That's the hottest hours of the year, plus 15% for reliability. Um, Imagine, if you will, if highways were built that way. What if highways were built with 30 lanes to manage Thanksgiving rush hour traffic, but were mainly empty most of the time? Grid infrastructure actually has a utilization factor of less than 20%. So it truly is mainly not used except for a few hours of the year. It's an extremely expensive and unsustainable business model. So the solution can be found with energy storage and other devices and techniques to reduce peak energy demand. So in this diagram, it's a very simple schematic. You can see the peaks on the left-hand side, notably one period of the day that has a high peak. And you can imagine the infrastructure has to be enough to manage that could be 15-minute peak, even though it's very short. So with energy storage, you charge at night and you can flatten out those peaks. Imagine you're the utility or the ISO. Clearly, the situation on the right is much easier to manage. If your job was to make sure that electricity supply was balanced with demand, this image on the right is a much easier scenario to manage because it's more predictable. This schematic shows how our technology can interact with the grid. Typically, we install batteries behind the meter on a client site, and we forecast these moments of peak demand and discharge the batteries. From the building's perspective, it's using the same amount of energy, but it's getting a portion from the grid and a portion from the batteries. From the utility's perspective, the building is using less energy at those moments. The problem with this model is the capital cost and the permitting risks associated with these batteries. The batteries are very expensive and very big. So when we look to the future, we envision that actually electric vehicles can serve the same purpose. If people are driving their electric vehicles to work, we can turn the capital cost of stationary batteries into an operating cost for mobile batteries and pay the drivers for the service of allowing us to access their batteries. And we've actually done this here in Toronto. We have 20 participants in 2 buildings in downtown Toronto, and we're expanding this to over 100 over the next year or so. Moving along, this is just some images so you can see what the batteries look like. These systems are 500 kilowatt systems, if that means anything to you, and they're saving the clients roughly $60,000 to $70,000 per year at no cost. That's not the gross savings, that's the net savings to the client. That's actually only 25%. The full savings are much greater, but we need to take a share for our own services and for financing, paying off the systems. This is an image from one of our vehicle to grid sites. You can see here 10 Nissan Leafs that are plugged into bidirectional chargers that are actually selling electricity to the building during peak moments. So this is what we would call a peer-to-peer energy transaction, a sale of electricity without the utility's involvement. Peak Drive is our marquee project. We believe it's going to be one of the largest transactive energy projects in the world, allowing both electric vehicles and buildings with energy storage to provide services based off of real-time market signals. So we got funding from the Canadian federal government. We've already started deploying in buildings in downtown Toronto. The target is to have about 20 to 30 buildings involved. Some of them with batteries, some of them with electric vehicles, all of them being managed by our software. And the long-term vision is an energy market platform. This is basically this concept of a stock market of energy, where we forecast peak events and send the price signals to optimize the operation of these DERs. So in this example, again, we're turning the centralized model on its head. Typically, we think of energy end users as buyers and utilities as sellers. In this scenario, imagine that the system operators and utilities are actually the buyers of energy services such as capacity reductions or frequency regulation, or demand response event, or deferring infrastructure investments. There are actually quite a few services that can be provided. That's only even a sampling of them. And the sellers in this case are you and me, and building owners and electric vehicle owners and solar power owners. Anyone with a distributed energy resource can provide services to the utilities and get paid for it. So we're actually creating new revenue streams for the owners of energy assets. This is an example of our technology in action. Back in January, there was a grid event, and we had a commitment to provide a 1 megawatt reduction over 4 hours. So how did we do it? We created what we're calling a multi-asset virtual power plant. It was actually a swarm of various different types of devices and technologies. It included electric vehicles, it included batteries, and even buildings themselves, where we sent notifications to the building operators to change their temperature set points, reduce lighting, turn off elevators, basically manual load curtailment. So you can see here is we had 8 different buildings participate, all of them with different energy characteristics, but our software was able to provide a consistent load reduction when the utility and the grid needed it the most. So finally, why vehicle to grid? I'm actually quite passionate about this. I think it's a really important opportunity. First off, understand that without accurate management, electric vehicle growth could break the grid. We did some back of the envelope calculations. Imagine people go to work, they get stuck in rush hour on the way home, they all get home at the same time, and they all plug in their electric vehicles at the same time. If that were to happen, that would be disastrous for the grid. In our back of the envelope calculations, by 2030, with the number of EVs projected to be on the road, the instantaneous demand from these vehicles would be about 3 times all of Ontario's peak demand right now. There is no scenario where Ontario is going to increase our nuclear generation by 3 times, or there's no more hydro, there's just no more generation to manage that. So what can you do? You can change the time of when people charge the batteries by sending price signals. And then better than that, if you bring in bidirectional functionality, instead of just minimizing the problem, you can reduce the problem. In this image on the right, you can see the increase from electric vehicles. But imagine if that charge happened in the valley at night, and we're actually able to reduce the peak. You get closer and closer to balancing out your demand requirements, which makes it much easier and cheaper to supply and less infrastructure. Again, the name of the game here is balancing supply and demand. So what we see is a tremendous opportunity. Imagine a future with fleets of vehicles. It could be an Uber-style fleet, or it could be autonomous vehicles. And these vehicles would be able to respond to real-time price signals to determine whether or not it should act as a transportation service or an energy service. So you can envision that in the morning from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., it's more important to get people to work. So it acts as a taxi and drives around the city and brings people to their work. But once you get through that peak moment, then what else is that car going to do? We don't need taxis driving empty. At those moments, then the car could go and drive to wherever the grid needs it the most, with localized price signals in case there are old transformers in the urban center that are very expensive to replace or renovate. So this is kind of our long-term vision of the future, a whole multifaceted swarm of, or you could call it nodes of different distributed energy resources. Sometimes I call them micro assets that typically the utilities and the system operators have no visibility into. But with our software, we can aggregate them, provide visibility, and through price signals, provide control so that these grid edge assets can actually have a significant impact on lowering overall system costs and ultimately electricity rates for everyone. So that covers all of the key points that I wanted to go over. I don't know if there's time for questions. I'm certainly happy to. If not, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or email me. My email is on the screen there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We'll hopefully have time at the end for some questions. And next, we are going to be hearing from Julia St. Michael, who's the Director of Sustainability Engagement at Enwave. Julia, are you unmuted in there?
I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Off you go.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you, Pollution Probe and Richard, for inviting me. And, I'm really happy to be part of this conversation. I know the topic reimagining urban networks is top of mind for everyone, but actually at Enwave, I think we've been trying to reimagine urban energy networks for quite a long time. So I'm really happy to be here today. As we are thinking about recovery, as we're thinking about the future, we're definitely asking ourselves, how do we ensure that the changes we make now will position ourselves, our cities, and our communities for the challenges of the future? And we're asking ourselves, how do we accelerate the adoption of clean energy, inside of Enwave, and support a prospering economy, especially in these uncertain times? So we're working diligently to highlight district energy as one of the best future-looking solutions for urban energy growth, not just in the time of COVID recovery, but further and beyond that. So today I will touch upon who we are at Enwave today, where we're headed, and how we see our business positively impacting and changing communities of the future. And I do want to talk about 2 projects that we have underway. So Enwave is a homegrown Toronto company. Many of you know the name, but you might not know that Enwave was purchased by Brookfield about 8 years ago. Brookfield took the Enwave name and expanded from coast to coast, becoming the largest core competency district energy company in North America. You can see on the map here that we own and operate systems in 11 cities, and we have a number of new systems under design and concept design right now. You can see our geographical diversity on the map, but also our technological diversity. There's biomass on the West Coast, waste to energy on the East Coast, and ice storage, deep lake water cooling, and even sewer waste heat somewhere in the middle there. So some of our systems are traditional, and many people think of district energy only in the traditional manner. That is, natural gas and electricity being used to generate heating and cooling at a central plant, which is then distributed to buildings through an underground piping network, like is shown on the diagram here. But we at Enwave are actively working to change these assumptions or preconceived notions about district energy. And we like to showcase our new projects and talk about our vision and really talk about what we see as possible. And we're not alone in this quest. Actually, the UN itself has a district energy and cities initiative focused solely on the benefits of district systems in dense urban centers. And they focus on the technical, economic, and social opportunities that those systems bring to the community. They state here, as you can see in this quote, that modern climate resilient district energy is one of the least cost and most efficient solutions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we are completely aligned with that statement and supportive of the work that they're doing. So what are some of the benefits of district energy? And how do they fit with where we want to go? And how do the benefits connect district energy to green stimulus and economic benefits, community resilience, and prosperity, sort of like that big package? Well, it's understood that community energy systems harness economies of scale. And that scale really helps to improve energy efficiency, reduce GHG emissions, and lower energy costs. As well, we can enable fuel switching at scale and enable the integration of renewable energy resources into the networks. These systems that we build relieve strain on the electricity grid, and they can also provide energy storage and demand response capabilities to that same grid. Plus, our systems can help cities avoid building new generation capacity in areas where they're constrained. I think a lot of this is right on point with our other presentations today. Plus, connected technologies can boost system resiliency and reliability, which is all good for city infrastructure and the citizens. Thinking about where we're headed post COVID recovery, we're looking at how district energy aligns well, very well actually, with the economic rehabilitation and job creation goals of new government mandates, because our projects promote the use of local and renewable energy resources, and we keep jobs in the communities right where we provide our services. Additionally, a highly trained workforce is critical to delivering low carbon energy infrastructure, and Enwave is kind of helping to create these jobs of the future. So we are supporting the transition to a low carbon economy, and we can add real and lasting value in this sort of period of uncertainty and growth into the future. So I wanted to show this slide here with Enwave technology options. There's just a few examples of some future-looking ideas we've been considering in Toronto, from deep lake water cooling expansion to upcycling and sharing waste heat, from geo-exchange all the way to biomass. And I wanted to show these sort of as a segue into discussing the two projects I want to focus on in more detail, sort of giving some real-world examples of the benefits and impacts we were just talking about, and touching upon a few of these technologies listed here. So the first project that I wanted to touch on is Bursey Glen in Markham. We are partnering with Mattamy Homes and the City of Markham to pilot a geo-exchange system on a community scale. It's the first of its kind in North America. This project marks a unique collaboration between leaders in single-family home development, sustainable energy, and municipal government. The development will include more than 300 single-family homes and townhomes, all of which will be connected to the community energy system for heating and cooling, as you can see in this diagram with the colorful underground piping system sort of sketched in here. So the community itself is in Markham, west of Warden Avenue. And you can see here there's a larger opportunity for development, but we're focusing on the yellow area. And we're using this first phase of development as an exploration or pilot project. And we do expect it will lead the way in making geo-exchange systems viable for the whole development here, developments in the neighborhood, and then hopefully across Canada and the US. The key to having this project be transformational is its scalability. Like district energy, this project could be scalability in pockets in different neighborhoods. Scalability both technically and in the replicability of the business model is important. So we're working through many details right now and hope to make some exciting announcements soon. But just on a little bit of the technical side of the geo-exchange system, we are using the basic technology, a heating and cooling system that transfers thermal energy to and from the ground, using stored energy to heat and cool these homes. That system is lower carbon and is much more efficient as compared to conventional home heating or conventional home cooling. And we're really using the ground as a thermal battery. I'm glad that I followed Matt, because the talk of batteries hopefully will translate smoothly here. What I find interesting with this project is we're actually looking at 3 types of geo-exchange configurations. We're looking at vertical, horizontal, and perhaps an open loop system. Our ability to choose to use a combination of 3 different types of configurations in this design is quite unique. And our ability to access the ground in this area beneath the parks, the driveways, and all of the areas of the subdivision is also very unique. And both of these characteristics allow us to reduce costs and increase efficiency throughout the whole system, right from the early design stage. So this is scalability, like quite literally scalability past any approach that could be done home by home or building by building. I want to just show this one slide. I find it quite interesting since I'm not an engineer. This diagram is a cross-section of road with the sanitary sewer lines, the storm sewers, the utility trenches, and other services are drawn on. But we also have our geothermal boreholes and piping included at this early stage too. So for me, this visually illustrates why we work with our partners right from the beginning, and why having sort of a holistic view of energy and communities is so important. We work very closely with the consultants to incorporate the infrastructure into the original community plan alongside, not after, other piping and services are designed in. And this makes it easier again and much more cost effective for the project as a whole. And it's one of the main reasons we're able to create a business model that works. And so we think that Markham and Bursey Glen is an excellent example of the types of infrastructure projects that could be supported by future government and that could help us manage growth in energy demand in the future. The next project that I want to talk about is thermal storage at the well. If anybody has not heard about the well, it's a 3.3 million square foot development northwest of Front Street and Spadina Avenue in downtown Toronto. There will be 420,000 square feet of retail and food services, over 1 million square feet of office space, and 1,700 residential units when it's complete. And we will be expanding our deep lake water cooling system and our hot water infrastructure to the well to connect it to the thermal storage tank that we're building there, what we call our thermal battery. Now here are two diagrams or illustrations of how the system works. On the left-hand side is winter mode, or sorry, the left-hand side is summer mode, and on the right-hand side is winter mode. This is a 7.6 million liter tank that is installed below P7, the lowest level of parking at the development. And it will have a peak capacity of 8,500 tons of cooling or thermal storage. You can see it at the bottom of the two diagrams. Essentially, the operation is the same in winter and summer. The thermal battery gets charged with hot or cold water at night and disperses that energy into the development during the day when and where it's needed. So here we see ourselves as further decentralizing energy supply in the city, and we're reducing the load on the electricity grid by using our off-peak charging capacity, not electricity, but this thermal cold and hot capacity. And we think these are some of the largest, most successful goals we've achieved at this site. And as well, the thermal storage here will serve as a hub or a node in the downtown west. And it is large enough and has the ability to serve 15 million square feet of commercial, retail, and residential space over and above that which we will serve the well. We're really proud of this development as well. I have a few photos I just like to show. These photos are from last summer when we were building and digging out the thermal storage tank area. And as you can see here, the development is quite early on. They've made it down to P7 level from the ground level. And in the orange square that you can see there, that is where our thermal storage tank is being dug. Here's another picture, almost not quite on top, but that you can see the thermal storage area. And the actual tank is the circular area. It's 50 feet across and 150 feet deep. Here on the right-hand side is a picture of our workers inside. Right at the beginning, they had not made it too far down, but you can see the size and the scale of the tank itself. So here are a few photos looking down into the shaft. As the summer went on, we made more progress. You can see from the bottom looking up, it does look like a little bit of a prison. And you can see at the bottom here, we have a full excavator that stayed at the bottom and just excavated out the shale and the bedrock as the project moved forward. And then the final picture here is looking straight down into the bottom. And we're pretty, as I mentioned, we're pretty excited about this project. And I do like to show these photos because now this tank has been entirely covered over and the buildings are being built on top of this tank, so we don't actually get a chance to go down and look at it anymore. But we're excited to see its performance and the impact that it makes for the community. So just in wrapping up, thinking about what's possible next. This is a futuristic rendering of Toronto's skyline. It's not any real plans. It's just a rendering. But looking at this rendering with growth and building, what's possible for energy, what's possible for community energy systems, what's possible for Toronto, and I think we have the moment now. I think we have a tipping point or a pivot point where we should be focusing on, the economy. We should be focusing on government and companies coming together, driving innovation in the energy sector, investing in new infrastructure or retrofitting existing infrastructure, reducing emissions, improving the health of Canadians, and definitely supporting a strong economic recovery. So at Enwave, we definitely believe district energy systems like those I discussed have an important role to play in the new future of cities and energy and where we're headed. With that, thank you very much. Of course, welcome questions as well at the end.
Thank you, Julia. Sorry, I almost interrupted you there. I apologize. Thank you very much, Julia. And next we have a joint presentation from the IESO, the Independent Electricity System Operator in Ontario, and Electro Utilities. We're going to start off with Patrick Lowe, who is a Senior Manager, Partnerships, Innovation, Research and Development at the Independent Electricity System Operator. Patrick, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Very good.
Perfect. Okay, technology didn't fail me yet. So thank you, Richard, and the team at Pollution Probe for inviting me to this very important and thoughtful discussion. I am Pat Lowe, the Senior Manager of Partnerships in Innovation, Research, and Development at the IESO. And what this role essentially means is I have a budget through Ontario's Grid Innovation Fund to invest, learn, and share knowledge from innovative projects in the clean energy space to the rest of the sector. So the IESO, we are at the heart of system planning of electricity for Ontarians. We are responsible for the planning of this essential supply chain, ensure that each and every one of you has what you need to turn on your lights and to keep them on. And as part of the supply chain of electricity, we traditionally have the usual suspects of resources and assets available to us. We have nuclear and natural gas for generation, transmission lines and step-down transformer stations for bulk electricity transportation, and poles and feeders to distribute electricity right into your home. But here's a question. With new and clean technologies available to us, along with the greater need to be flexible with grid services, and Matthew from Peak Power touched upon this in his presentation today, with the unsustainability of utility business models, are there opportunities to innovate this supply chain? And of course, the answer is yes. Otherwise, my presentation would have been done right there. Distributed energy resources, or DERs, batteries and storage, solar and PV, electric vehicles, smart thermostats. These technologies have the capability to not only diversify and enhance our grid, but also to democratize the electricity system. And at the heart of it is the customer itself. DERs have the flexibility to be modular and the potential to scale accordingly to both individual and system needs. Take residential energy storage. And when Julia mentioned that she was glad that Matt spoke before, I'm also glad that both Matt and Julia had a chance to talk about this. But residential energy storage, there's a potential for a homeowner to have an asset right in their homes that can do several things. Provide energy arbitrage to assist with the bottom line on electricity bills, to provide services back to the grid if, and this is a big if there's an innovative and forward-thinking market for it. And finally, to assist with keeping the lights on. And for anybody here who lives in Northern Ontario, the last one is priceless. It all depends on what is the most valuable to you. Energy storage allows you this choice with how you manage your electricity, along with what goes into your wallet. Now, at the distribution system level, DERs are alternatives to the traditional poles and long kilometers of feeder. They're generation sources right at the local level, thus minimizing the supply chain, which also minimizes losses in the delivery of electricity, money spent on feeder lines and other infrastructure. It's also a way for utilities to deliver on their core mandate of customer reliability in new and flexible ways. Finally, at the bulk system level, the DERs installed today and the DERs to be installed in the future has all added up. Today, DERs makes about 10% of Ontario's generation capacity. From a sister operator point of view, DERs has become one of the largest single contingencies in Ontario. And what that essentially means is if all DERs went offline today, we'll be in the dark. This tells you just how important DERs are now to the bulk electricity system. So we at the ISO, we're actually undertaking many innovative activities today to enable more DERs into Ontario and serving our mandate of providing more competition to today's electricity system. We're giving each and every one of you a larger role to play when it comes to ownership of the grid. So I won't go into details of all the activities. They're all fantastic, so please do take a chance to take a look at everything. But I did want to focus on one specifically, and that is IESO's York Region Local Electricity Market. So today there is a missing piece for procuring DERs from the system. While our wholesale markets allow for DERs to participate, the threshold is high given it's 1 megawatt. Not a lot of residential, commercial, and industrial businesses have assets with flexible capacity that large. There is no intermediate market until now. So as part of our ongoing work and innovation, the ISO is piloting a local electricity market, an innovative and forward-thinking market that's the first of its kind in Canada and possibly North America as verified by EPRI. This project will allow for DERs at the 100 kilowatt level to participate in a local capacity auction situated right here in York Region. In partnership with Electra, ISO is designing a completely independent distribution system operations that allow for DER resources to participate in Ontario's electricity system that previously they didn't have access to. And some of the learnings out of this project include the cost effectiveness of DERs versus traditional system investments, the design of a local market constructs to secure DERs at the distribution and local level, grid interoperability, which is the communication of system and markets between the wholesale level all the way to the local DER providers, and exploring solutions to all the barriers that exist today for having DERs as non-wire solutions to the grid. So this project does have some great, fantastic partners, the ISO, National Resources Canada, as well as Electra. And the one thing I did not do in this presentation is actually provide you my email. So if you do have any other additional questions for this particular project or have questions about some of the work that ISO is undertaking in general, you can reach me at pat.lo@iso.ca. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Jerry.
And the slide should be coming up right now. Jerry?
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. And thank you, Pat. So my name is Jerry. Okay, sorry. My name is Jerry. I'm the head of grid innovation at the Grid Energy Technology Center from Electra. I'm very honored to be here to have this wonderful discussion with everybody virtually. Just quickly walk through some aspect of the York region, ISO York region, local electricity market pilot project from the Electra perspective. We are very excited for opportunity to partner with ISO, but is having a profound impact from the LDC perspective in terms of how we're going to go forward shifting our new the LDC business model. So what we've seen lately in the market is the proliferation of the DERs, alternative wires, non-wires alternatives that have been adopted by the LDCs, utilities worldwide as part of their regional planning. Particularly, we're seeing, in 12 years, the cost of the DERs, solar, particular, and storage, while reaching the tipping point with the traditional poles and wires investments, and the EV cars will be reaching the tipping point with the fuel cars. So as LDC, we are being challenged in terms of increasing costs, maintain traditional infrastructures, but also looking at customer needs. As Pat pointed out, rightfully beginning, the customer is in the center of our services. And Matthew, you mentioned at the beginning as well, the highway pictures is well said. As a utility, we are in an interesting, challenging time to look at a new business model to integrating the grid edge technologies, alternative new resources that we can help our customer, in a better way. So early in 2019, so IESO and Electra have identified an emerging local growth in the York region. The York region is a fast-growing community in our service territory. The rapid growth in the electricity demand is expecting to exceeding system capacity in the years ahead. And we are looking at the community needs. The communities are interested in solutions that can be deferred or reduced. The need for more poles and wires built in their neighborhood. So the pilots are looking at addressing the capacity needs for neighborhoods using the non-wires alternatives. The project will seek to design local energy markets to allow participants in the neighborhoods to own the DRs to compete in the providing the grid services, while also being interoperable with the IESO wholesale market. In terms of benefits, the learnings that Pat mentioned early in his presentation, we're also seeing the pilot will enhance the coordination and communication between Electra's distribution system and IESO's system as well. Assess and test options for sending a granular price signals for distribution level markets, and use DRs as possible non-wires solutions to a competitive energy market mechanism. And then lastly, testing the distribution level solutions using the non-wires alternatives to defer our network infrastructure investment. In terms of objectives, I'm not going through all of them. Just quickly emphasizing that the key thing here is we are developing the platform to procurement contracting schedule the DRs from the participants for the project, and exploring the transitions for LDC such as Electra to transition from a NOO, meaning the network distribution network operator, to the DSO. And lastly, this is our grid center, where we're coming from, what we do. So the information is there, so people are more than welcome to read through it. For time constraint, I think I'll just stop there for any question maybe coming from the audience.
Great, thank you very much. I know we are really approaching 3 o'clock, and I'd understand if some of you have to run, but we'll stay online to answer a few more questions, and hopefully I can impinge further upon some of the presenters to stick around for a few more minutes while we answer a few questions, as we have gone a bit beyond when I promised we would close down. Just to answer some of the questions that have come up before, there was one question about the use of Pickering for peak power, and Pickering is currently not used. It's not used as a peaker plant. It is used is designed to be run as a base load plant. So it is operating 80–90% of the time, I can't remember the last load factor, is just that because in Ontario we have surplus baseload generation, a lot of the time that output is being exported to our neighbors. So really a lot of the Pickering's output becomes used in the GTA primarily at peak periods, given that we have surplus baseload generation. So it's not that the plant is operated as a peaker plant, it's just the way the output works. We have some information on that in our technical summary, as well as the report itself, if you want to see. And that's there's some links to some of the sources as to how that's being run. That is changing potentially a bit because of the nuclear refurbs is reducing surplus baseload a bit. But of course, given the current circumstances, there still is a bit of baseload. If there are, we have a few other questions there, and that we have up. One of the questions we had was targeted at peak power, and there was a question around the support. So, if Matthew's still there, is peak power still supported by the federal government, Matthew? If he can, if Matthew is still around, or
I'm sorry, I am here. I was just on mute.
no problem.
We are still in a program that we received funding for earlier through SDTC. That's not finalized. And then this FedDev program has just started. So we have 3 more years as part of that one. So yes, we are still working as part of 2 different government programs.
Great. And there's another question around the use of heat pumps in the GTA. If further questions, please do. If you do have any other further questions, please do send them online. Does anyone have any with the potential for heat pumps in the GTA in Ontario as well? I know there's been some movement on that. I'm not sure. We've produced some work on that, looking at the future natural gas. So there is a potential for heat pumps, but you have to look at the heating arrangements in Ontario and where heat pumps work. I don't know if there's any other comments on heat pumps. Julia, you might know something about that.
Richard, yeah, I can jump in. For the Mattamy project that I was talking about, the Markham project, there will be heat pumps there, connected to the GeoExchange, the geothermal system. So that definitely will have heat pumps. On a larger scale, what we are doing, and we did receive federal funding for this project, we're actually adding industrial size heat pumps to our heating plants so that we can inject, or we can actually start to create greener, more economical, or lower carbon heat, and add that to our system, therefore reducing the carbon emissions for our entire heating system. So we have 2 separate areas at the moment that are actually in design, and some has construction underway to add these large heat pumps into the system. So I absolutely think that heat pumps have a great opportunity, both at sort of the household level or the smaller one building or one home level, and at scale, like what Enwave is doing, adding into our centralized plants to make our entire system more green. So yes.
Okay, great. That's like, is any of the other speakers have any comments to make on that? Okay. I don't know if there's any other questions. Is there any other questions that people have for our speakers? I know you also have the connection. You have the emails for the speakers. So if you do have any further questions, you can please send them to me or send them directly to the speakers if you have any further questions. With that, I guess only 3 minutes over, which is not bad. We can end the webinar. First off, we'd like to again thank our funder, the Atmospheric Fund, TAF. Without them, we could not do this work. We really appreciate their support. And if you want to stay connected to our work at Pollution Probe and Energy Exchange, these are the ways you can stay connected with us, and you can also connect with me directly as well if you have any further questions. I'd like to thank all the speakers again for all their great work and their great help on presenting today. Really appreciate their time and their effort they've made to it. I thank them again. And for the rest, and for everybody, thank you very much for attending our webinar. We hope to have more of these webinars in the coming weeks and months as we are all stuck at home. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thanks a lot for having us, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.